wireless networks. In this nugget, we address wireless networks. We'll start off by talking about LAN wireless networks, and these are those ubiquitous access points that are all around nowadays in homes and in offices where people can connect to their local network or the internet using wireless networking. Also, we'll talk here about Bluetooth networks, and although you don't need to know a lot for exam purposes, you need to know some basic terms. Alright folks, I gotta tell you, I really love saving the best for last. One of the favorite things that I like to hack or to work with is wireless networks. And call me lazy, but it's probably just because they're so easy to mess with. It doesn't really take an awful lot of effort. I also have to point out, however, that for certified ethical hackers, in purposes of the exam, I have heard, let's just say, from some sources, that there's really not a lot about wireless on the exam, which kind of surprises me because that's a big part of hacking, and it's always one of the targets that we should go after. But anyway, I'm sure there's going to be something on there, but I don't know that it's going to be as significant as some of the other topics that we've looked at. Regardless, I want you to have a good education in some of the wireless things that we might need to address. So let's take a look here, first of all, at just a wireless overview. Okay? Now, why do we even have wireless? That's mostly to overcome physical limitations. For example, in my home, I put in wired networks, so I've got an RJ45 jack in most rooms. And in one of our rooms, we had a television set up with a TiVo, and it was put into the RJ45 jack, and I had a wired connection to my TiVo to get program updates, all that kind of stuff. Well, my wife decided to rearrange the room one day while I was out of town on business, and I came back and the whole thing was all in different places, but there was no RJ45 jack where we put the TiVo, and so I was kind of left without any connection. So I bought a TiVo wireless adapter, and now it's connected to my wireless network. Now, certainly, I could have gone up into the attic and put a RJ45 drop into the wall behind the TiVo, but you see, I've been in my attic before, and there was one time a few years back when I somehow or another slipped in between the two rafters and crashed down through the drywall, 10 feet to the floor. Yep, my wife thought that was quite hilarious, and we all had a good laugh about it after I got out of the hospital. Now, there's also several different types of wireless networks. There's A and B, which are a little bit older. You'll probably see B around a lot still. A just never really caught on that much. And then there was G and N. N's probably the one that you'll see on most current wireless access points that come out nowadays. By the way, these are called wireless access points, or more commonly, just APs nowadays. Also, I may have mentioned this when we talked about sniffing several nuggets ago, but you do have to go through your conscience, certain legalities. Maybe the laws are different wherever you live and things like this. But when you're sniffing wireless traffic, especially if it's unencrypted, that's really just a public radio signal. And there's not really an expectation of privacy. Now, I'm not an attorney when I'm telling you this. I'm just giving you my opinion in this case. But there's not really an expectation of privacy if it's unencrypted and just broadcast like that. The same way that a public radio station is broadcast and you can tune into that station in your car, for example. However, this may change when it comes to sniffing public signals and you're picking up what would be expected to be private passwords to maybe POP3 accounts or things like this. Even though it's easy to pick those out and to find them, depending on the legalities there, it may be that that person has an expectation of privacy that you could be considered in violation of. And certainly, if they're using any kind of encryption, even if it's easy encryption, like WEP, then, and if you crack it, then again, that party has an expectation of privacy, and you have now potentially violated that. So you do have to think about that a little bit. And again, as I said early in this series, I'm not an attorney. I'm just giving you my opinion there. Check on with the laws in your own area for that. Now, there's a couple of low-level security things that I want to talk about here as well. And for these, I'm going to show you my own access point here shortly. Actually, it's not even my production access point. It's an old Linksys that I had at the bottom of a box, and I just uncovered it the other day, and I thought, hey, that'll be great to show these demos with. It's not really that old. It still has current modern standards. It uses Wi-Fi Protected Access version 2 and Advanced Encryption Standard and some other things. But anyway, I want to show you these things relating to hiding the SID, first of all. Now, what's that about? Well, you see, when you browse for a network, a wireless network, and this can be done in Windows or in Linux or whatever. They all have similar functions there. But in my backtrack machine, for example, here, I might go to YCD Network Manager, and you'll see here in just a moment as I connect my wireless card that it's going to find some wireless networks there. And here they all are, okay? So we see a few different things here. Now, especially in a densely populated area or an apartment complex, a business park, something like that, you're going to see a lot of different access points here. Now, one of them's not showing up here. Some of them will come and go. It'll appear now, and then a few moments later, it'll just disappear. This is the one that we'll be working with. It's called Nugget Lab, and you can see I'm only using a minimal encryption, wired equivalency protocol right here. There's also another one on here, and it seems to have blinked off for the time being. Maybe if I refresh it, it'll come back. But my original Linksys access point was, the SSID was named Linksys. Well, it just so happens that a neighbor of mine also has an access point called Linksys, and they never set up any security or anything like that. It's just an open AP. Well, just to be honest with you, I actually started recording this nugget yesterday, and I didn't realize that I had a neighbor with another AP open. So I started configuring it, and I set up encryption and everything like that on their AP by accident. Now, I don't know who the neighbor is, but I'm pretty sure that they're not getting internet access right now because their AP is now encrypted. I think this would be a great time to go down to my local community center and put up on a corkboard an advertisement for wireless PC repair or something like that. You know, maybe I could make a lot of money. Hopefully my neighbor would find that and I could get paid for fixing the very thing that I broke. Okay, I refreshed the screen again. I thought it was in here. There it is. Okay, right down here. This poor person, I don't know. Apparently they reset it because now it's unsecured. They may have called the cable company or something, and because our internet is through our cable company, and they probably just told them to hit the red button on the back and reset it. So anyway, I'm glad to see that they're back in business. Anyway, if I didn't want people to see this because I didn't want them to make connections to it or even to make it a target for hacking, I might want to hide this SSID that I was talking about earlier. By the way, especially in Linux, this is not only called an SSID for Service Set Identifier, it's very often called Base Station Service Set Identifier, or BSSID. So those are the same things there. But how would I conceal that? Well, I just go back into my browser. Let me go over here. And what I'm going to do is to go to my wireless settings, and you can see I've set up WEP here, but we'll get back to that here in a moment. And I just, first of all, change that from Linksys to Nugget Lab. Now, actually, there's a couple of reasons why I would want to do that. And let me tell you what those reasons are. Number one, if I just leave this as the default, for example, my neighbor's Linksys that I so graciously reconfigured yesterday, well, I was able to do so because they never changed anything about it. And the default password for a Linksys is the password admin. In fact, you don't even need a username. You can just enter in only the password of admin and get in and fully configure it. And that's what I did. That's why I was able to set up security and everything on their access point. So that's the first lesson. Always change the defaults. Never just plug it in and let it run. Also, I changed the SSID. Now, there's other ways of identifying the vendor here. If I just change this and never put any encryption on and never change the default administrator password or any of those things, then just by looking at the MAC address, for example, I could still figure out what brand this was and still log in with admin. Okay, so we have to take a few other measures there. But anyway, I changed this name right here, and what I could also do, though, is to hide it by choosing Disabled here and then choosing Save Settings. Okay, now once I've done that, I'm just going to go ahead and continue on. Then that's going to blink off in a few moments here. It doesn't always take place immediately. It's going to blink off on my Linux machine when I refresh the network settings there. Now, while I'm here, let me just show you this is the kind of thing you would want to do. You'd want to go to Administration over here to change the default password. Now, it looks like a long, complicated password. That's just some some dots they filled in there. In reality, the default password is admin, and I would just change this to some other convoluted thing. Okay, something that's not easily guessed for purposes of obvious security here. Now, let me go back over to my Linux box. And I've given it a few seconds here. Maybe by now it may have blinked off and we may not see it here anymore. So let me give that just a moment. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if that's it and if it just somehow threw something weird at us. Anyway, I'm not seeing that Nugget Lab anymore. That's for sure. But that certainly is a weird one. Let's try it again. Refresh again. I don't know what that... Oh, although it's not the same one, though, because I'm on channel 6. I happen to know that. And this one's on channel 1, so that's not likely to be the one that I just hid the SSID for. There's also this one here. This is suspicious looking. Default. That's unsecured. I got pretty good signal strength. I could get free internet access off of that one. I could get free internet access off of this one. Free internet access off of the other Linksys, which again seems to have blinked off for the time being. Alright, once more I refresh the screen here just to double check. And I don't see it here at all now. So must have been just a temporary weird thing that was going on when I turned off the SSID broadcast. But just to make sure for in the future as well, just to make sure I lock something down here, I've also gone back into this access point and changed the standard channel to a fixed channel 6. Now before, and by default, and many of the devices are like this now, there will be an auto setting. This is usually a good thing because if there's 2 or more access points especially that use the same SSID in the vicinity, then they may contend for that same channel and it can continuously kick users off and put them back on the network. It's very disruptive. So the auto setting is very often a good thing. But just for consistency's sake, I'm going to put that on channel 6 for right now. Now then, going back to my backtrack machine here, I want to address how we can work with this. Okay, one thing I want to do is, I happen to know that, and we kind of stack the deck because we know the name of the SSID, and we know that it's hidden here, but wherever you are, you might assume that somebody's trying to hide one of those from you. Okay, and you don't see it in the list, so you want to try to get it. How would you go about doing that? Well, there's a few different things you can do. First of all, on my own backtrack machine here, I have a specific network adapter attached. I want to show you the specific brand here as well, and it's this one. You can get these at Amazon, and just make note of the model number here. They only do B and G. I wish they did N as well, but the point of these is not so that it will give you the latest technology with that. The point of these is because there's already a driver included with Backtrack that will support this item, and it will allow you to sniff in monitor mode, which is going to be important when we want to try to find the SSID as well as many other things. Okay, so I'm going to do an IW config here just to show you that I do have that specific network adapter attached here. It's a USB attached through a USB cable, and it's actually through VMware as well. So in VMware, what you would have to do, just for your educational purposes here, in VMware, what you would have to do is you'd go to VM, removable devices. Won't let you show it, so let me do it. VM, removable devices, and then here's the device. You would have to choose connect. It kind of goes off the screen there, but there's an item there that says connect. Make sure that that's connected there. And then the reason why you see 2 windows there of the same operating system is only because this is remotely connected through VNC. That's what you're looking at right now. Okay, so you've got your access, you've got your wireless card connected. Now we have a couple of other things to keep in mind, especially if you're in something like a public coffee shop or a public library. If there's any tracking or logging that will keep track of which IP address has been assigned to your specific MAC address, then that could get you into some trouble. If I do an IF config here, you'll see that on my wireless LAN here, I have a specific hardware address that ends in 54B4. Later on, and of course, you're not going to do anything illegal because you're a certified ethical hacker, or you're about to be. Or maybe you're going to get away with as many illegal things as you can before you become ethical. How about that? So anyway, just as a hypothetical, if you don't want anybody to associate the IP address to this MAC address at some point in the future, a couple things you can do. First of all, I'm going to do an IF config and then WLAN 0 down. I want to bring that interface down. The reason being, I want to change my MAC address. Yes, you can do this. Even though the MAC address is hard-boiled, so to speak, or carved in stone into the actual interface itself, and you can't change that physically, you can kind of virtually change it. So what I would do is I would do the MAC changer item, and I would change it to a random address, or there's a few other options here as well, and I would do that on WLAN 0. Okay, and now you can see that what's happened here is it used to be this MAC address, but now it's changed to a random fake MAC address. Okay, so that's now my MAC address. I'll do a IF config WLAN 0 up and bring it back up again. Did I do something wrong? Let me check it out. Huh, doesn't look like I typed anything in wrong. Well, let me just try it again. It's giving me an error for some reason. Alrighty, folks, I had to reboot my machine. Who knows? You know, that's hacking for you. Sometimes things just go crazy for you and you have to start over again. But anyway, I rebooted. I did double check the WLAN 0 again. Remember, it was this MAC address. I tried running Mac Changer before, and I forgot to bring down the interface. But you have to do that before you can change the interface. So here again, I brought the interface down. I changed it to a random MAC address, which is now F2D2 is what it ends in instead of 54B4. Then I brought the interface back up, and everything seems to be fine. So let me do an IF config again. Yep, sure. Okay, so everything looks fine that way. Now, again, this is because later on, if someone's trying to track down who was hacking in that coffee shop, they won't be able to track down the IP address that was issued to me because I won't keep this MAC address. I'll just randomize it to change it to something else or go back to its actual physical address. And I could say, that wasn't me. I don't have that MAC address. Okay? Unless you recorded it and sent it out across the internet like I'm doing right here. Oh, as a quick other thing, by the way, if you do go to public places, and if you were not ethical, then this is what you would do. And I know this, again, is not any of you. First of all, check for surveillance cameras. There's a coffee shop that I go to that's really a great location because it's near a college and there's lots of wireless activity going on there. And there's a video camera, but it only tracks you at the cash register. If you go over to a certain corner that I'm very well aware of, then you still get wireless signals that are very strong over there, plus from a couple of other adjacent businesses, and there's no video camera on you. The other thing is always pay in cash, okay, because you don't want your credit card records to track you down to that specific location. But again, ideally, you would only want to do this if you're being paid to do a penetration test either on that coffee shop or on an adjoining business. And that would be a legit use because very often organizations get hacked not at their physical property. It may be at an adjoining location that's within range of their access point. Now, the next thing we'll want to do, and let me clear the screen just to kind of get away from the clutter here. Next thing we would want to do is we would want to bring this card into what we call monitor mode. And that's another advantage of using the specific vendor that I showed you, because this card not only has the drivers for Backtrack that are included with Backtrack, but it also allows you to promiscuously sniff in monitor mode, which you have to do with wireless devices. It's kind of similar to promiscuous mode on wired devices. So anyway, to send it in monitor mode, I'd go airmon hyphen NG and start, and then the name of the interface that's wireless, WLAN 0. On yours it might be 0, might be 1, might be 2, who knows, whatever else. So now we see that we have this has been brought up as a monitor mode item. If you want to confirm that, you can do an IW config, and that'll show you two devices now that are in monitor mode. And if I were to run Wireshark ampersand, I'm only doing the ampersand because I want to leave the command terminal open so that I can enter in other commands there. Then you would see that as I start to do sniffing here, that Mon0 is the one that's actually sending and receiving the data. And if I were to click on Start, you'll see beacon data and the like. And now, this will also pick up beacon frames from other access points. For example, this Cisco one here, I don't think that one's mine particularly. There's a few other ones here, other neighbors and so on that are near me that I'm picking up. And I'm just going to kind of go down through here and let's just pick something out. So I'm not going to elaborate on all this because there's quite a lot of data in these frames, but these beacon frames are very revealing at times. Because if I click through the IEEE 802.11 wireless LAN management frame, go down to my tag parameters, you'll see that the SSID of this item is Smith 2010. Okay, which is, by the way, is a little bit revealing as well because I know that that access point is at least a couple of years old. And maybe on that particular access point, there might be an older technology that becomes exploitable at some point in the future that I might be able to take advantage of. A small opportunity possibly, but at least it's there. Other things you'll see here is it's going to tell you things such as the channels that it's on. If you poke around here, it's on channel 1 for an example right now. The speeds that it's capable of. Lots of kind of good data here. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and stop capturing here. We don't really need to work with this right now. If you want to go the long way around, there are ways of being able to determine the actual SSID here, even for hidden SSIDs. Oh, heck, I'll just go ahead and show you. Now, what I did was I continued to run Wireshark, and while it was running, I went over to my Windows 7 computer with its wireless card, joined it to the Nugget Lab wireless network, and then I disjoined it. Okay, if you just disjointed a couple of times, then stop the capture, then what you'll see happening here is anytime someone authenticates against this particular access point, it has to send the SSID parameter. So it has to send this in plain text. And now, if I do a filter like this one you can see up here, this means that it's going to only show me the appropriate data that I need here. Then it's going to give me Nugget Lab. And if you just go to the same SSID parameter that you see here, it shows up now in plain text. For this reason, Microsoft themselves, in fact, have now recommended that this is not really a good security measure, although for certified ethical hacker exam purposes, you'll want to think that it's a good measure to hide your SSID. Now then, another thing you could do is you could just run arrow dump ng and whatever on mon0 in my case, or whatever your monitoring interface is. Then what it'll do is as wireless traffic goes by, it'll start to pick up these ESSIDs, which is the same as your BSSID or your SSID. Okay, they're all the same thing for effective purposes. But we're still not seeing the actual name of my Nugget Lab access point. So how can we do that? Well, one thing, just as a quick side note, you could use a utility called airreplay-ng to force deauthentication, which then makes those clients reconnect as well. On the other hand, if you just wait for somebody to come back into the office and hook up, turn on their laptop so that it connects to the wireless access point, then you're going to be seeing something like this, which is what I just did offline. I just connected my wireless client to the access point. When it does that, it again has to send out the name of, let me Control-C this, has to send out the name of the SSID, and then it appears in clear text here. So we see then that just hiding the SSID, not that good a security, still easily discoverable. The other thing that's kind of low-tech security here would be the MAC filter. You can filter based on who can or cannot connect, for example. If I enable a MAC filter here, then remember that, of course, all of your network adapters and network devices all have a MAC address of their own, right? Well, what I could do is to prevent PCs below from accessing the wireless network. And I would only do that if I knew that there was some some party that was kept connecting to my access point that I really didn't want them to. For example, if I did live in an apartment and I found out that somebody kept figuring out a way to connect to my access point and getting free internet access, well, if I knew their MAC address and that's easily discoverable, then I would just enter in that MAC address here, whatever it is, A15, whatever the MAC is. Okay, and then they would be prevented. Now, the way around that is you could use MAC Changer again in something like your Linux machines. You can also change the MAC address on your Mac OS X. There's easy ways of doing that, as well as using something like SMAC, that's SMAC, on a Windows box. So easy way to change the MAC address to something that is allowed. And you could go the reverse way here as well. This would be this first one would be a blacklist, so to speak. This other one here would be more of a whitelist. So then I would say I only want to allow these specific MAC addresses to make a connection. I'd enter in, the MAC address of a couple of laptops, my phone, my iPad, other things like that, until I populated this with only those clients that I wanted to be able to access it. Now, what then again would happen is a hacker could then just sniff network traffic using, monitor mode, for example, and identify several MAC addresses that are permitted to communicate, and then they would just change their MAC address as necessary so that they could also get on the network. Now, of course, since the wireless signals are really sent in the clear, so to speak, without any kind of obfuscation or encryption at all, you want to come up with some kind of an authentication and encryption mechanism. The wired equivalency protocol is the weakest of these three that I've got listed here, and it's been known to be insecure for well over a decade now. However, a lot of people still use it because it looks easy, and some people just want, they want to kind of say, I want some security just so that I can say I'm not being lazy, but I don't want to work too hard at it. So they'll just use the web keys. The fact of the matter is, most of these are actually pretty easy to implement, and you can make this relatively secure. Now, when it comes to the security mode in this Linksys access point, you have a couple of different options, as you can see up here, several different options. Using the weakest of WEP, I could go to a couple of different key links, the longer one being the more secure, but still not secure enough. Now, your access point may have a different method for doing this, but what Linksys has you do is to enter in a passphrase or a word, and then you will click Generate, which runs it through a hash, giving you a result here. And what you can do is to use any one of these four keys, and you configure that on your network interface card, your wireless card, on your client side. So I would have to match this key on the client side, and if it does, then I'll be able to successfully connect. So let's go ahead and take a look here at how we could crack the key necessary to make this connection. Because just on my own, I could click on connect, but it's just really a guessing game of trying to put together a bunch of different numbers and letters to make a connection. It's really virtually impossible just using only human effort. So what we would do here, and I've already done all of this in advance because, again, like I said, it takes several minutes, but I would run this command right here, arrow dump ng, and then the base service set identifier, and I would enter in the MAC address of my Linksys, which is right there. And then I already happen to know what channel it was on, so I entered in the channel right there. If you don't know what channel it's on, there's a number of other tools you can use to find the channel, and we've kind of already looked at that. For example, you can find the channel when you find the SSID, for example, that we looked at just a moment ago. Then what I would do is I would write the results of this out to a file, and I've decided to name the file crack.dwep. Aren't I a punny guy? Anyway, it's called crack.dwep. And what you'll see happen here is, and I've actually run this many times because I've been testing this for a while, what it does is it'll create a crack.dwep file in several different ones. One of them will be a comma-separated value file that you can use to analyze in a spreadsheet, for example. A couple of these are Kismet files, which is another hacking utility for wireless. But we're interested in this crack.dwep cap file, and every time you do this, it'll increment the number by 1. And I've done this a number of times. That's why I'm on number 6. Anyway, just follow these instructions and follow the same pattern for whatever your particular devices are. So again, of course, you'll have a different MAC address and maybe a different channel as well. Then you'll press enter and let this thing run. And I'm just going to go ahead and press enter to let it run. Don't really need this right now because I've already run the crack. At the time that you're doing this as well, by the way, what you want to look for is the number data column. Right now, I got a smacking value of 0. That's not going to be any good. The way this works in terms of decrypting this using the aircrack utility is it has to get lots of samples of data to be able to work with. We see we're getting a little bit there, but gee, I might need 100,000. It's going to take a long time if I keep doing this. So what we can do to kind of put the hurry up on that is we can run this utility here, air replay, and then you can see here that I've specified -3. What that does, that's just their designation for an ARP replay. We're really injecting ARP packets on the wire to force it to replay some critical wireless data that will give us more samples to choose from. Then there's also the H, which will specify, actually, so we can go over here instead, the B, which will specify our MAC address for our BSSID. And then there's the H, which is the host for another host on the network's wireless card. For example, my Windows 7 machine has this wireless card inserted into it. And then I'm monitoring all of this, or running it all through Mon0. And this MAC address right here, by the way, this is really because I'm spoofing that MAC address as I'm injecting packets on the wire. Okay, so then we would get that going. And it'll just keep sending out trash, basically, is what it's doing. It's eliciting a response from the access point. It keeps poking it in the eye and getting a reaction from it so that we can get more data to collect from. Then the next thing you can see here, I've already successfully decrypted this, but before I did that, I ran aircrack.ng, and then I ran it against my crack.dwep.cap file, and it was able to... This is a live file, by the way. Once you run this over here, this is continually expanding the size of that file with additional data packets. Okay, so it just continues to run, and it runs, and it runs, and it runs. And then it will retrieve data out of that. Now, you'll get some messages periodically that say this failed. Don't be disheartened by that. All that really means is it hasn't collected enough data yet. Once it collects some more data in the cap file, it'll run it again automatically, so you don't have to really babysit this. Once it gets enough data to successfully cryptographically crack that key, it'll tell you that right here. Here's the key that it found. Okay, and it ends in E4B6. Let me go back over here, by the way, to my Linksys device. And you can see here that as I've gone to the end of the line there, sure enough, it ends in E4B6. Now, of course, it puts the colons in there, but if you had to really actually type that in your network interface card's properties, then you would leave those out. But in this case, let me actually run that again. In this case, since the cap file now had all of the data that it needed, once it got all the data that it needed, I could run this real quickly right now and watch. bam, it just decrypted it almost immediately. That's because, again, the cap file had all that data. But as you're waiting for it to expand and to give you enough samples, then it may take several minutes. Now, these other two are Wi-Fi protected access and Wi-Fi protected access 2. When it comes to cracking either one of these for the personal edition, you pretty much use the same method. This one primarily uses TKIP, Temporal Key Integrity Protocol. This one can use TKIP as well, or Advanced Encryption Standard, which is better. If you have the choice, you should choose Advanced Encryption Standard. And what these do is they'll take a key that you generate first, similar to what we did with WEP, only it's going to be better because it uses other things as well. But it'll take that plus 5 other parameters. For example, the SSID of the access point, the authenticator nonce or announce, the supplicant nonce or snounce, authenticator's MAC address, which is in other words the access point's MAC address, and the supplicant's MAC address. So it kind of puts all of that into an encryption blender, generating a unique result. So the keys that you'll enter in for Wi-Fi protected access and Wi-Fi protected access 2, that's only for purposes of generating another key based on those unique factors. Let's take a look at that one. Here, if I go over here and go to WEP, and then I go to Wi-Fi protected access personal, then you can see here that I could enter in any passphrase. It doesn't really matter. Here, what you want to do, though, is to enter in a good passphrase. This is very similar to actual users' passwords and the same principles. You wouldn't want to use a dictionary word, for example. You would want to use something more complicated. You can even go to, there's several websites out there, but you can Google for password generators and give it various criteria for the kind of password that you want, and then you enter that in here, and that would be pretty well uncrackable because most of the hacks against WPA come out of dictionary attacks. If they don't do a dictionary attack successful, then they revert to brute force or rainbow tables. But even a good rainbow table, if you've entered in a really good passphrase here, they're not going to get it. People will die of old age before it'll crack these, at least using current methodology or unless something new comes out. Also, the WPA personal and the WPA 2 personal, these are too personal. These are where you just enter in a passphrase like that. The other ones were for enterprise. These, you have to specify a radius server. And what this means is a radius server will handle the authentication on behalf of a client. So it will take the credentials that I supply and it will send them over to some kind of an authenticator like an Active Directory server or something like that to see whether or not my computer is legit and allowed to communicate on the network. And if I am, it'll just let me do so. Alright, now for Wi-Fi protected access or WPA2, they both use the same method for cracking them. And either one of those, in the terms of cracking it, it's only as good as the dictionary file that you use, because otherwise if you have to go to brute force and the password is pretty complex, you have very little chance of being able to crack it. So really we depend on dictionary passwords, dictionary files for this. Now this is how you would do this, and I've already done this in advance. Because it takes several minutes, and then I just came back to show you here. You'll do similar things to what we did before using arrow dump again. You're going to run it against this BSSID. Oops, don't know what happened there. This BSSID that I showed you here. Okay, so it's very similar to what we've already done. This time I'm just going to run it to a different file. Instead of crackdawep, it's crackdawap. Okay, a big difference there, right? Anyway, I'm sending it out through Mon01 again, because that's the interface that we have to work with this here. I'll go ahead and run this, just so you can kind of see it running. And again, we need to capture some data with this, but we need to do an air replay in order to forcibly send more deauthentication data. See, for right now, we've only got 11, 12, 13 numbers of data. It's going up like one per second or something like that. So here I'm sending a whole lot more. I sent a lot more to get some more data going through. And we send a deauthentication broadcast. Now in this case, it's actually a little bit different because it's not so much of the brute force as it was with WEP. With this one, what we're doing is we're just trying to elicit a response so that we get ePOL packets. Let me show you what I mean. I already ran this once in the past, like I said before, and it created a file called crackdawap01. I opened that up in Wireshark, and you can see here, as I sort on the protocol, that there's 4 ePOL packets down here at the bottom. These happened when I ran this item that I showed you just a moment ago, this air replay attack. Okay, when I ran that, that's what prompted these epoll packets. These are the basis of what we're going to be able to run our hack against. So once we had gotten those, let me stop the rest of this stuff because I'm not actually using any of this. Once we'd gotten to that point and we'd been able to run that, then we run this tool. And the tool that we run here is aircrack, and we can run it against the crack.wap file. I need to come up with less tongue-twisting names here. Anyway, I'm running it against a Word file, and the Word file is located here, and you can see it spelled out. It's kind of wraps around the side there. Maybe if I expand this, it'll be easier. There you go. Dark code with a 0 for the O, .lst. And then once you run that, you can see that I ran it up here. It opened up the cap file, and then it ran several of the cracks against it, and it just went through and found the WAP key, which is chocolates. I'm really in the mood for chocolates right now. I haven't had lunch, folks, so I'm kind of starting to lose my mind, and I want some chocolates. Anyway, I'm going to run this again so you can see how it looks when it's actually running. But it goes through various passphrase until it eventually gets to the dictionary word that you chose. Alright, now in conclusion here, I just wanted to point out that I did change this offline to WPA2 Personal. With the advanced encryption standard, I changed the passphrase as well. And I'm still able to crack it using the exact same method. And you can see here that it was able to do it with that one as well. So it doesn't matter if it's WPA or WPA2, or whether it's TKIP or AES. As long as it's a dictionary word, it's going to get cracked. Now finally, let's talk about Bluetooth, just in brief. Now, I don't think you need to know a lot about Bluetooth for exam purposes, especially in terms of a lot of the technical details of it. However, you should know some of the basics. First of all, just to understand that it's very easy to use and easily discoverable. Many of the pairings that take place don't even require any kind of code or any kind of security at all. So if you've got a cell phone here, for example, and one of those, I'll just try to make an earpiece here. One of those earpieces that you hang on your ear, and you can send and receive calls through this earpiece wirelessly to your cell phone over here. Well, a lot of times you just pair them up, and you don't even need to do anything special beyond that. You can also pair these up to things like Bluetooth in your car. Many of you may have keyboards or mice that are Bluetooth as well, so you don't have wires or cables running all around behind your computer and stuff to connect those things. But there are some attacks that come along with this as well, and most of these are designed for attacks against things such as smartphones, like Blackberries and the like. One of those things you might have would be something called blue smacking, which is just a bunch of fun. A hacker friend of mine, I don't know if I want to call him a friend because he could be kind of mean. I'll say an acquaintance. A hacker acquaintance of mine was in the line at the airport, and they were waiting to get on the plane, and this one, I don't know if he was a salesman or something like that, or he thought it was a real big shot, and he was on the cell phone on his Bluetooth, and he just kept talking really loud and, being really, I'm Mr. Big Shot, and, we're talking about all kinds of money and all this kind of stuff. And then my friend just got sick of it, so he got out his his smart device and what do you call it? Smartphone, excuse me. And he ran a little utility on there that just kicked the other guy's Bluetooth offline, and he kept having to recall this guy and recall. Every time he would make the call and start the conversation again, my acquaintance would knock him off. And so it was quite a lot of fun, apparently, for this guy. But that's blue smacking, just a denial of service kind of an idea. There's also blue jacking. This is going to be where you're going to send messages to someone's smartphone. So you can send someone a text, for example, or some other kind of a message on their screen that they don't know how it got there. Generally, again, it's related to mostly mobile devices, smartphones, and the like. There's also blue sniffing, which is kind of what it sounds like. You can capture data off of a smartphone. And then there's blue scarfing, which is going to be a little bit more like the actual theft of data from one of those devices. So generally, for exam purposes, just be aware of what those 4 terms are, and you'll be good. In this nugget, we talked about wireless networks, starting with access points and how you can be able to find hidden access points, for example, as well as being able to crack WEP or WAP passwords or keys. We also talked about Bluetooth networks, and this is just in brief because you don't need to know a lot for the exam purposes, but you do need to know those terms that I shared with you. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.